Hey, we are coming to you from Olds, Alberta, and look, it is Archie the tank, a beautiful piece of history. Archie is an M4A2 EZ8 Sherman tank. And speaking of tanks, that's what I'm playing with today because look at the size and weight of this thing. Archie has a 75mm gun, but today my Sony a7R5 is featuring the Viltrox 135mm f1.8 Canon. So this 135mm lens from Viltrox is part of their Lab series. This promises to be the best lenses they've ever made from an optical standpoint. There is also going to be a 35mm, a 50mm, and an 85mm coming out in this series as well, but this is the first. Now this is also an incredibly affordable lens, but can something that is less than half the price of its competitive Sony G Master 135mm 1.8 be just as good optically? Is it too good to be true? I'm Chris Nichols, this is Petapixel, you're gonna find out. Okay, the weather's not very charming today, nor is the light, but we are exploring the charming little town of Olds because it's on the way to Jordan's parents' cabin, just north of Calgary. And, you know, we're going to spend New Year's together. That's what we do. Our families are all getting together. It's going to be fun. So we're going to do a lot of our lens review from the cabin as well and some testing. But we thought, why not explore this cute little town with this 135mm lens? And Jordan and I both really love and appreciate the 135mm focal length. In fact, we did a roundup video almost a year ago between the Sony, the Canon, and the Nikon. You should definitely check that out. But now we have this Viltrox lens. You know, a 135mm lens is an interesting one to use. Absolutely good for head and shoulders portrait, really dynamic if you do full body portraits, but you do need to have the physical distance. I myself prefer an 85 for most of my portrait work, but I always have fun using a focal length like this. But the first thing that you will notice about this lens is it is physically huge. So why is this lens so big and heavy? Well, I do want to talk about a certain technique that manufacturers can use to get better optical performance out of a lens, and that is to oversize the elements, actually make the lens bigger than it might physically have to be to project that light circle onto the sensor. This is something that Zeiss did back in the day with their Otis series lenses to great effect. I mean, they were optically fantastic lenses, but they were huge physically. And then in the DSLR days, Sigma copied this technique with their Art series lenses. They made beautiful, bright lenses that were very sharp, very good, but also quite physically large and heavy. But look where that got them today. And now it looks like Viltrox is using the same technique because this lens is way bigger and heavier. So let's get into handling on this now. Small town motel, check. Handling talk, check. The Viltrox 135 f1.8 has, first off, a beautiful hood design on the front, just a classic bayonet lock, but I like the rubber on the front. 82mm filter thread, it is pretty big. So a nice manual focus ring here. It's actually pretty smooth. It's not linear, but I didn't have any real problems getting nice, precise manual focusing. So I actually think they did a good job there. 2 customizable buttons here on the body. And so that brings us to the aperture ring. And I want to talk about this because for me, this is one of the more disappointing features on this lens. So first off, I can set it for smooth or clicked functionality, but my main issue with it is the click stops. It has way too many, okay? There's lots of click stops on here and they're not indexed properly to the aperture. What I mean by that is if I do 2 little clicks, click, click, that gets me half a stop. But sometimes it's 3 little click, click, clicks to get me half a stop. It's not consistent. And I really wish it was just 1 click per half stop or third stop. Then I could actually predict the aperture that I'm changing just by listening to it or by haptic feedback. But as it is now, it's just kind of sloppy feeling. Another problem, if I turn it all the way to the right, eventually it will go to the auto mode where I can set aperture from the body. That's fine, but unlike pretty much every other lens in existence that has an aperture ring, there's no locking switch for that. So it's very easy to bump this or move it and I'm back out of auto, and that can be really annoying. Now, an interesting choice that Viltrox has gone with is the LED display panel on the top of the lens, and this gives you a lot of interesting feedback. And I do like it. It's a little bit laggy when you're changing apertures or focusing, but not too bad. So it'll basically tell me what aperture I'm at. It will give me the focusing distance. It does not give me a depth of field indicator, though. That's unfortunate. I wish it had that. And it will give me a little heads-up display on things like autofocus or manual focus mode, that kind of thing, focus limiter stuff. So I like it. I still feel like just classic, you know, silk screening on the front of the lens would do just about the same thing, but hey, that's fine. I don't hate it. It does work pretty well. I do have a focus limiter here as well, so nice controls overall, but I just wish the aperture ring was a little bit better. Now, if I mentioned that this is a really heavy lens, I don't know if I've done that yet. This is a really heavy lens and a really big lens. I mean, first off, Putting my fingers here in the grip, I can actually feel the lens against my knuckles when I put my hand in here, which is not terribly comfortable. It's super tight, but this is also a very heavy lens. 1,300 grams, 1.3 kilograms here, okay? I mean, this is quite heavy. This is the same weight as a full-size 70 to 200 f2.8. Everybody else's 135 1.8s are under a kilogram, so you definitely notice it here. Like, it's not impossible to carry around, but it is absolutely a factor. And if you're looking for something more lightweight and compact, this is not the lens to get. Now, some other nice features here, though. It is solidly built. I mean, it's rugged, it's got weather seals. I think it's well designed. Nothing feels sloppy and loose. I also like that we've got the USB-C port there for firmware updates on the lens mount, so that's going to be weather sealed as well. I don't have to worry about being exposed to the elements. Now, as far as other features go, there's no image stabilization built into the lens, but that's typical of any of these professional 135 1.8s. Again, you'll have a body that has IBIS. It's been doing just fine so far. As far as autofocusing goes, this is something I was concerned about because Viltrox is not known for making autofocus lenses for very long, and so this actually has pretty sophisticated gear. It's got twin voice coil motors in there, and they're nice and quick. I will say, they're not noisy, but I can hear them. So when I got the camera up to my head, I can hear just a slight whirring noise, but I don't think it would be distracting for anybody around you. And it is very quick, and it is very precise. You could be limited on a Sony body to 15 frames per second shooting, but I'm confident that if you're gonna shoot any sort of sports or indoor action, the autofocus would keep up to that. But you know, we thought we'd find some more interesting stuff to shoot on Olds, but we were wrong. But we did explore a few businesses and stuff, but the light's getting dark, it's getting low, it's getting cold, so it's time to head to the cabin. All right, and we're at the cabin, so much better, time to relax, except we still have a video to do. So, while I've got these beautiful Christmas tree lights behind me, this reminds me of a good time to talk then about bokeh and what the look of the autofocus areas will be like, because of course, a 135mm f1.8 lens gives us that beautiful shallow depth of field look, fantastic for portraits. So, taking a look at bokeh here, first off, shooting wide open at 1.8, specular highlights. You can see here that cat's eye effect in the corners, which I actually do like. I mean, again, it's subjective, but I like that look. Beautiful, clean bokeh, though, no onion rings whatsoever. By the time you stop down to f2.8, the cat's eye is gone, so if you don't like it, you can still get that shallow depth of field look very easily. You'll notice a slight soap bubble effect around the specular highlights, but honestly, I think it's fairly subtle. So as far as the look of the autofocus areas, this does a beautiful job. You can see transitions from in focus to out of focus. Very smooth, very natural, nice soft backgrounds. I think Viltrox have done a good job here overall. But let's talk about Loka as well, longitudinal chromatic aberrations. That's where you get color fringing in the foreground and background out of focus areas. And of course, it's very hard to remove in post. And I want to talk about it because telephoto lenses like this with bright apertures like this do tend to suffer from Loka. And so as we take a look at our handy dandy test chart here with our silver wire, you can see the Loka. It's apparent. It's kind of a blue-yellow split. It's not terrible, but it is certainly noticeable. This is actually a result that we got very similar to the Sony 135 1.8 G Master that we tested. It also had a similar amount of Loka. I don't think this could be terribly problematic, but yeah, the best result will be none, and here we do see some. So I wouldn't particularly call any of the 135 1.8s macro lenses, but they all actually can do a fairly decent close-up capability. You know, sort of tight shots of a person's face, for example. The Sony G Master can do 1 to 4 life-size reproduction, which is exactly what this does. And they're effectively at the same distance, 0.72 meters, which is basically right there, just out of reach of my finger there. So I get a nice amount of working distance. I can still get a fairly tight close-up, and that's very handy when you want to just get a person's eyes or certain features at a wedding, for example, you just want to showcase. So decent performance. But of course, a 135mm lens is a fantastic portrait lens. So one of the things that we want to do is bring out a flash and do some portraits here just to see how this lens can perform. Okay, so we're going to take some portraits here. We've got the Westcott FJ200 flash, but I did forget to bring a light stand.
luckily we have children, so we're going to incorporate some child labor, and we're paying them with promises of food and inheritance eventually. So Liam, Jordan's son, is going to be our light stand. You're doing a great job. A little bit better, more positive attitude. I'd appreciate that. And my daughter Maddie is going to be a wonderful model as soon as that grimace goes away. And so one of the interesting things I want to talk about with these flashes, when we're testing lenses, we often like to use on-camera flash or off-camera flash, because what it does is it has a very fast flash duration. It's almost like using a really fast shutter speed. And so it will actually let you shoot the sharpest results possible on the lens. So it's a great test to show exactly what a lens can do. But this is a fantastic little kit. If you want to get an FJ200 for yourself and a Rapid Box Switch Octa S, check the link in the description below, or just go to fjwestcott.com and you can find it. And make sure that you follow all appropriate labor laws. Okay, but now it's time to talk about sharpness. Can all of this extra glass give us some benefits when it comes to optical performance? Well, again, looking at the test chart here, the center of the image at f1.8, you can see beautifully sharp, tons of detail, actually very good contrast as well. It's nice and vivid, good sharpness and detail. And when we stop down to f4, I really don't notice any real difference. So this lens is already giving us fantastic sharpness wide open. But you can see here in the corners a little bit of softness when shooting at f1.8, some vignetting. It does get a little bit dark, but as we stop that down to f4, you'll notice that vignetting goes away. It does sharpen up a little bit. The corners are still very usable, even wide open. It's not a bad result at all. When we look at this compared to the Sony G Master 135 f1.8, honestly, I'm going to consider it a wash. It's a testament to Viltrox's ability to make a lens for a lot less money and still achieve basically on par sharpness. They have very similar corner sharpness. They have very similar central sharpness. And overall, I would actually say the Viltrox beats the Sony G Master when it comes to just having more contrast at that f1.8 aperture. So we also tested this lens for flare, and you can see actually the Viltrox 135mm handles flare pretty well, not too much of a loss of contrast. We're not really getting much of a washed out look when pointing at bright subjects, and ghosting is actually pretty well controlled. And so the overall impression I'm left with on the Viltrox 135mm is actually a really good one when it comes to optical performance. I think the Viltrox has done a fantastic job here. It's basically on par with the Sony G Master 135-1.8, which is a great lens in its own right. We're getting similar sharpness. We're getting, in some cases, even better contrast. Really nice soft transitions from in focus to out of focus. So I think anybody buying this lens will be very happy with the images that they're getting out of it. And really the main downside comes to an ergonomic one. I mean, again, this is very large, and it's not the weight so much that bothers me. It's just the fact that my fingers are crammed in there against the grip. At least on the A7R5, it's not very comfortable to hold. And for anybody with bigger fingers, it's even less comfortable. But it is also a big, bulky lens, and that's the sacrifice you're making. But when you consider the incredibly low price point compared to the Sony G Master, anybody would have to take a long, serious look at this lens because it's such good value for the dollar. So I think you guys get the idea that I've actually been really impressed by this new Viltrox Lab lens, and it makes me want to look forward to the 35, maybe not the 35, but the 50mm, the 85mm. Hopefully we'll get an opportunity in 2025 to review those lenses as well. We're definitely intrigued to look at the Viltrox products going forward. And if they do the same thing where they oversize the lenses, maybe that won't be as such a big issue with lenses like a 50mm or an 85mm 1.2, but we'll just have to wait and see. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and do leave your comments below. Let us know what you think about this lens or any comments that you have. Check out the Petapixel podcast as well. All your favorite podcasting apps are playing it. Just search for Petapixel Podcast, or you can watch it on this exact same channel. And hey, it is now 2025, so this is a great time to get a Petapixel.com Pro membership so you can look at Petapixel.com ads-free, and there's lots of bonuses going forward in 2025. Happy New Year to all of you. Thanks again for sticking with us for another year. We really appreciate your loyal viewership, and we'll see you all this new year on Petapixel.